got some space. But to avoid people having to climb over you, that would be fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at this, which is a joint Ashden Grantham Institute event to launch our new Climate Action Co-Benefits Toolkit. My name is Emma Jones. I'm currently working with Ashden to run their city region network, and I'm also lead author of the toolkit. So if you think it's rubbish, don't tell me. With a different hat on, I'm a partner at CAG, and I've also been on the judging panel at Ashden for 10 years. My job this afternoon is simply to steer us through the afternoon, to introduce the speakers, and of course I get the most exciting bit, which is to tell you about the housekeeping. So there are no fire alarms planned. In the event of an alarm, you exit via the 2 doors at the rear, although I should warn you, if you go out of that one, you can't come back in, as I've already discovered. But if there's a fire alarm, you won't want to come back in, so that's fine. Follow the fire escape signs down the stairs. Toilets are on this level. You want to go out of those doors and go left. And the lifts are also past the toilets through that door if you need them. Before we get started, I would just like to introduce to you the members of the Ashden City Region Network. We've just had our City Region meeting ahead of this one. And they've been instrumental in the development of the toolkit. It was really their idea to develop it in the first place. And several of the members have been really key in commenting and contributing to that. So could I ask you all just to give everybody a wave, please? City Region members. And they'll be around later if you want to go and talk to them. So the format for this afternoon, we've got a packed agenda of 2 hours of talks from a range of fascinating speakers. Because of the size of the audience, we haven't actually got scope for questions to the speakers, but what we have got is Slido. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to log on and use Slido. We can see the results of the first panel in real time here. The login was on the previous slide. So if you haven't already logged in, if you've got the app, use the app. If not, log in on the website here. The joining code is #toolkit1. We'll be asking you various questions throughout the course of the afternoon. There is also scope through Slido to submit questions to us. We won't have time to answer those today, but we can review those after the event and get back to you. If you've got any specific questions for speakers, we can pass them on to speakers. I think the speakers are also all staying later for the networking and the drinks, so you'll be able to talk to them then as well. So we will be finishing very promptly at 5 o'clock for the drinks, and my colleague Cara down here will be keeping all the speakers to time. So if I could ask the speakers to keep an eye on her to make sure you're not overrunning and we won't be eating into people's drinks time. So just to kick us off, let's look at the results of our first poll, which I have to say isn't a terribly surprising result. I can see people are still voting. We've had 67 votes so far. We've definitely got more than that in the room. So if I just give you a few seconds to cast your votes. But funnily enough, the main barrier to councils taking more action on urgent climate change is lack of funds. Closely followed, well not very closely followed, we then got officer time and lack of expertise and knowledge neck and neck at 17-18%. Interestingly, the least popular of all of these is public support, which I think is really interesting. I have a feeling if we'd done this poll a year ago, perhaps, it would have been quite a different picture. I don't think the funds would have been looking any more rosy, but I have a feeling we'd have had a higher proportion of people feeling that public support was a barrier. So I'm going to turn that off now so that we concentrate on the slides, and I just have to remember the instructions to do that. So bear with me 1 second. Yes, that has worked. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker then. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Jonathan Porritt. And for those who work in the environmental sector, he really will need no introduction. But I imagine we might have some people in this room today who are very new to the environmental sector, and a big welcome to you. And for those of you, Jonathan is a former director of Friends of the Earth. He's founder director of Forum for the Future, and he was chair of the UK's Sustainable Development Commission. He's also the author of the book, The World We Made, which is set 30 years in the future, when the world is in a much better place than it is now. I'm reading it at the moment. And for those who are prone to despondency about the current state of the world, the current state of politics, I would recommend it as an inspiring read and an illustration of how we might navigate the road ahead towards a low-carbon world. So, Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. And nice to have one's book referenced so quickly in the proceedings. Sadly, it's almost impossible to get hold of a copy any longer as it's now out of print, but there you go. It will be a play later in the year. I'm so excited about this that I just had to tell you all. Anyway, yeah, because this balance between what is really going on out there, the good stuff and the bad stuff, is, I suppose, essentially what this toolkit is trying to capture in this moment now. And you can always start with some fairly depressing reminders of how rapidly things are changing in the real world, physically in the real world. I thought today was a good one. I always like to be completely up to date with my climate apocalypse. And today was bang on the nail. A little bit of research into the speed with which glaciers in the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush are melting twice as fast between 2000 and 2017 than they were before. So you store that one away. You get one of these pretty much on a daily basis now. I suspect there's probably some poor research student at the Grantham Institute who has to keep a daily log of what the latest climate disaster actually looks like. And they really do keep rolling out one after the other, as you know. And it is very hard to go on processing this as if it was just another data set that we have to deal with psychologically, as if this was just nearly normal, but another thing that we have to be particularly resilient about and particularly good at coping with on this kind of basis. Of course, you might all be persuaded that everything is now okay. We have a government here in the UK that has decided that climate change really does matter, that we are going to achieve a net zero economy by 2050. The Prime Minister, in her dog days, has decided this is part of her legacy effect. We still have 4 candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party, and therefore the next Prime Minister of this country, all of whom have committed to achieving a net zero economy by 2050, which is pretty extraordinary, as you can absolutely guarantee that about 6 months ago, none of them would have known what that actually meant. None of them would have had the first clue. And I picked up a little bit of skepticism there. Do they know what it means now, even though they're all signed up to it? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is probably not. Probably not. So we know that we've still got this chronic, ongoing, near-permanent dysfunctionality at the heart of this government. And given that we're going to be celebrating the efforts and endeavours of what is happening at the local level, it's probably no bad thing to start there, because it is one of the most powerful context-shaping influences on what local government can do. And that story about lack of funds is just another manifestation of how hard that really is. This is still a constant problem that we face day in, day out. And as someone who's spent a lot of time working in the built environment, you will all know that the changes that have happened in terms of our zero carbon agenda for buildings in the UK since 2010 and then since 2015 has written out an absolutely critical part of the low to zero carbon endeavour, net endeavour for this country, for no particular or apparent reason whatsoever. And I've done a little bit of research into this because it fascinated me to see who was lobbying to get rid of the zero carbon agenda for the built environment. Who was it who was actually there in 2010, 2015 saying, ooh, this stuff's going to really be damaging to our business, to the sector. We must get rid of it. And the extraordinary thing is nobody was actively lobbying for the changes that were made at that time. Nobody. And normally, if I can find someone to point at, I like being able to do that. But there is nobody. So in cases like this, we know that we've got a rolling pattern of built-in disinterest and incompetence at the heart of central government. And it doesn't go away. Extraordinary piece published recently about the total lack of coordination on electric vehicle charging infrastructure for this country. You have so many speeches you could point to now from Secretaries of State saying how important it is that we're going to be able to accelerate the move towards an all-electric transportation system, all-electric vehicles, limitless enthusiasm, any joining up whatsoever as to the thing which will actually make that a deliverable? Nothing. So for me, it's a really interesting starting point for all of us at the local level. And what I think is so important today, and what in effect we're celebrating, is the recognition now, again, that local authorities, particularly in the Metro Mayor's purview of influence, are going to have to pick this up again and do the heavy lifting again. Some of you will have a sinking heart when you hear my intonation of the word again, because it isn't as if this is completely new territory. Quite a few of you, just scanning the age range in front of me, will of course remember how close we got through Agenda 21 to bringing some of these ideas right to the heart of what local politics was all about at that time. Right to the heart of it. Pretty much disappeared over a period of time now. So again, a little note of realism needs to be kept at the front of our minds about this. This is still a really tough call. And as we celebrate some of the actions that are already going on, and you'll hear from 2 or 3 of those involved in the city's network about what's already happening there, we just have to remember that this demands of all of us an ongoing level of commitment and courage to continue with this. My last little reminder, I'm as fascinated as all of you are, I'm sure, about the emergence of the Extinction Rebellion in our midst. I love the fact that a lot of local authorities now are out there with their own personalised commitments to the emergency, the climate emergency story. I have been actively lobbying Extinction Rebellion as fast as I possibly can to get them to follow up on that and say, brilliant. We will be marking the day when you declared a climate emergency, and we will be at your door in 6 months' time asking you to show us your action plan. Because a climate emergency, without a fully worked through action plan, touching on every aspect of this agenda, is just another form of self-indulgence. So those action plans are what you want to be focused on today, what we all want to be focused on, as you know. And today we're celebrating in particular the benefits that will bring, these incredible co-benefits that pursuing a low-carbon agenda in our cities, towns and cities across the whole of the UK would actually mean for people, would mean for the budgets of many of our local authorities in this country. So that's what we're on about today. I'm sure you'll pick up on those things that really matter to you, because there are many, many co-benefits which you will hear referred to today. I've been a trustee of Ashden for a long time. I am really delighted at the way in which this work has been taken forward in a very close partnership with those people in the city's network, which has been fantastic, and delightful here to be sharing this also with Grantham. So I'm just very happy to be here. I am really sorry to say I won't be here till the bitter end, or whatever it may be. I got a puncture earlier today, occupational hazard for London cyclists. Blame former mayors for the state of the city's roads, obviously not this one. So at a certain point I will have to disappear. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. We had a fascinating debate as part of our meeting earlier about climate emergencies and what they mean, and a whole range of different views expressed on that. And we'll be hearing from one of our members, Jane Wildblood, later about what it means in their area. So if I could turn your attention back to Slido, we're going to get the next poll up, I think, if we can get the... Yes, there we go, by magic. So if you could just have a think about what you think the most important change that cities will need to make in the next 20 years. Now, obviously, we haven't given you the option of all of these, and I know the answer is all of these, but if you'd like to have a vote on which of these, is it to ban all combustion engine cars, timely given that today is Clean Air Day? Is it to engage all citizens in climate change action? Is it to improve the energy efficiency of buildings, to make cities more self-sufficient with local food and local energy, or to end single-use plastic across the city? Now, if I just give you a moment to go to that poll and cast your vote. It's not working. It's not working. Voting is closed, it says at the top. The person with the technology is going to sort that out. We might come back to that. I tell you what, Please don't be distracted from the next presentation, but at some point during the next presentation you can cast your vote, and we'll come back to that at the end of Neil's presentation. So, oh, it's up now. All right, well, if you're really quick, so vote now, and we'll see. Oh, look at that, so speedy, 27, 33, this is so exciting. So at the moment, engaging all citizens is the winner, closely followed by improving the energy efficiency of buildings. Not a single vote for ending single-use plastic. That's probably because of the audience. That isn't the focus of our session. So yeah, engaging citizens in climate action is the winner, and that's very appropriate because that's a large part of the idea of co-benefits in this toolkit, is taking everybody with us on this journey. So to introduce our next speaker, so Dr. Neil Jennings is Partnership Development Manager at the Grantham Institute here at Imperial College, and he's the lead author of the paper Co-Benefits of Climate Change Mitigation in the UK, which Ashden provided support on and which provided a lot of the material for the toolkit, which we're launching today. So over to Neil.
I might take this off the screen so you're not so... That's right. Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you very much, and delighted to see so many of you here in the room, and also to have partnered with Ashden as well. As Emma mentioned, my role is Partnership Development Manager, helping to support our scientists to communicate their research outside of Imperial, and also to form partnerships like the one with Grantham. I'll be presenting on the co-benefits paper, which you've got a copy of hopefully in front of you, and I'd like to thank my co-authors of the paper, Dr. Danielle Effect and Dr. Sarah Dimateas, who can't be here today. So to give a very brief summary of what Grantham is, so we're a hub of climate change related research here at Imperial. Our vision is for a sustainable, resilient and zero carbon society, and we try and work towards those goals by training PhD students. We have around 100 PhD students. We support students and staff to innovate, to take their research and turn it into businesses and into products. We conduct research, as you'd imagine, from a university. And the last two things that we do are relevant to today. We look to translate the scientific literature into forms which are policy relevant and to communicate with the public, so informing and connecting and bringing people together. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I'll cover the following. Very briefly, I mean, you could talk for a whole hour or more on this, on the urgent need for action on climate change, the need to bring in co-benefits. I'll give a kind of case study around domestic energy efficiency, an example of a toolkit developed by Danielle Effect, who's one of the co-authors of the paper, and then end off with some kind of recommendations about the relevance that co-benefits have to local and national decision making. So many of you will be familiar with the Intergovernmental Panel's report on 1.5 degrees, which came out last October. This highlighted the stark difference between a 1.5 degree and a 2 degree world, and the central conclusion was that every fraction of a degree matters in terms of the consequences for society and for the natural environment. I pulled out a couple of comparisons here. So we're obviously at 1 degree above pre-industrial levels now. If we go to a 1.5 degree world, the summer that we had last summer, the really hot summer, would be one that occurs 1 in every 4 years if we go to a 1.5 degree world. If the globe heats by 2 degrees, you're talking about that summer occurring every other summer, with obviously attendant impacts that has for what then becomes an extreme summer. That's obviously shifting those extremes. One thing that always sticks in my mind in the kind of natural environment from the 1.5 degree report is the difference of the impacts of climate change on coral reefs. So if we go to a 1.5 degree rise in global temperatures, you're talking about 75 to 90% of coral reefs globally going into decline. If you go to a 2 degree world, you're talking about 99% of those coral reefs going into decline. So if you value the natural environment, and I'm preaching to the converted here, but that's just something which I think is really kind of important as to one of the things which we look to as a motivation to decarbonise. So you may not be able to pick out the precise details here, but at the moment we're emitting approximately 40 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide globally each year. The Intergovernmental Panel's report on 1.5 degrees set out the pathways that we would need to go down in terms of our carbon emissions if we are to avoid a 1.5 degree rise in global temperatures. 2 key messages. Firstly, we need to decarbonise steeply, approximately halving global emissions by 2030. Secondly, we need to get to net zero, or to zero by around 2050. So, as Jonathan mentioned, the government's commitment is welcome, but with certain caveats, and obviously the question is actually following through on these commitments. So I guess bearing in mind that steep trajectory we need to go down, a key question is how do we keep everyone happy and look at the way in which action on climate change can relate to other actions that people are concerned with in their priorities. And the images here kind of depict the kind of what you could see as some of the two extremes. So the work that Extinction Rebellion have been doing, really pushing for immediate, urgent action on climate change. And on the right-hand side here, this is the example of the Gilets jaunes from Paris, people out in the streets protesting against a carbon-related tax. So how do we kind of square these two issues? Well, for me, this is covered on page 4 of the briefing paper, in case you can't pull out the precise details in front of you. I've updated this slightly from the last few months. For me, it's important to go back to what issues the public are actually concerned with. So what this graph shows is data from Ipsos Mori, who survey the public once a month, asking them what is the key issue that you're concerned with. And this shows the data over approximately the last 12 years. The key thing for me is this dotted line going along the bottom, which is those people who raise the environment or pollution as a concern. Up until recently, that figure hasn't figured above 10% of the population, which kind of illustrates the point that we need to look at other issues that people are concerned with and think how we can tie, both in terms of the way we frame action on climate change, how we can tie that in with these other priorities, but also from an organisational perspective, how we can tackle multiple key policy issues simultaneously. There's a few other things to bring out from this. So the line in green here is the economy, as you can imagine, around the recession back in 2008. The kind of orange line here is the NHS. The one that depresses me most is this grey line, which is the EU, which basically suggested that before it was forced on people actually didn't really care at all. Yeah. But the other thing this could also show is that the way in which the Brexit issue was framed as being an NHS issue, £350 million on the side of a bus, helped to galvanise that attention. The question could be, could we achieve something similar in the way in which we talk about climate change, bringing in these other issues that people see as being their priorities? So just to kind of define what I mean by co-benefits. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change define it as being the positive or negative effects that a policy aimed at one specific objective can have on another objective. And they suggest that while co-benefits are often referred to, they often don't formally get integrated into the decision-making process, and there's an opportunity there for doing so. So what the paper does is to go through, it kind of groups some of what we think the co-benefits are in 4 different categories around health and the NHS, immigration and security, the economy and unemployment, and poverty, housing and inequality. And rather than going through these in detail, because I don't have the time, I'm going to show you a little video which hopefully gives you a quick flavour and summary of what we mean by these co-benefits.
Our world is warming, but taking action on climate change can make all of our lives better, and here's how. Improving the energy efficiency of our homes helps to alleviate poverty by making it cheaper for everyone to keep themselves warm. It also reduces the risk of illnesses like asthma and pneumonia and saves the NHS money. Electric vehicles reduce air pollution and help all of us to breathe clean air even in city centres. Cycling and walking more also reduce pollution and improve our health, while a diet with less meat is lower in saturated fats and reduces our chance of getting heart disease and certain types of cancer. Growth in the low-carbon economy creates jobs, while climate action reduces the risk of extreme weather events which may otherwise cause disruption and increase the cost of our food and our insurance premiums. Energy efficiency and renewable energy make the UK more secure by reducing our reliance on imported oil and gas. And on the international level, climate action reduces the risk of conflicts emerging over access to resources. And of course, action on climate change reduces the damage done to the natural environment and to vulnerable species like polar bears, helping to preserve the natural environment for our children and grandchildren. We still have time to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, and there are so many benefits to taking action now. Our research contributes towards a cleaner, greener, fairer future. So join our mailing list or follow us on social media for the latest news and commentary on climate change and the environment.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we're talking about when we consider climate co-benefits, climate action co-benefits. What I'd like to do now is give a kind of worked example of how these things relate to each other, specifically focused on household energy efficiency. So in the UK at the moment, we have a situation where if you're living in poverty, you're disproportionately likely to live in a house which has an F or a G rated energy performance certificate. That is to say, it's a poor in terms of its energy efficiency. Those poor energy performance certificates and poor energy efficiency means that for people living there, it's physically harder to keep their house warm, both because heat is literally leaking out of the windows and out of the roof, but also because they're in poverty in the first place, so they have less disposable income to be able to keep themselves warm. Poorer communities are disproportionately likely to face the choice between eating and heating as a result of living in a house with poor energy efficiency. That then has a knock-on impact to the physical and the mental health of those people living in those houses, which increases the costs to the NHS, which for the children living in those houses mean that they're more likely to miss days at school through respiratory related illnesses like asthma, which means inevitably if they're missing school, that will impact negatively on their educational attainment. For their parents, they're more likely to miss days at work through being ill themselves or for having to stay home to look after their kids, which then means, at the moment we're sending a proportion of our workforce to work ill because of the poor quality houses in which they live in, which negatively impacts their productivity when at work, increases the cost to the NHS and potentially increases costs in terms of benefit payments because people are having to drop out of work, which feeds into this pernicious cycle of poverty. People are missing days of work, they have less income as a result of it, they're therefore more likely to find themselves struggling to pay their household energy bills. So okay, I guess the question could be, how can we break out of some of this pernicious cycle? Well, an element of the solution is to look towards improvements in energy efficiency of the housing stock, helping to break down some of this relationship between living in poverty and having a house which has a poor energy efficiency, which would increase the chance of people actually being able to heat their home, which would reduce NHS costs, reduce physical and mental illness, which would mean that the kids could spend more days actually at school because they weren't so ill, their parents could spend more days at work, they would go to work actually being more productive because they weren't ill, which would also reduce costs to the NHS, benefits for the wider economy, and also for things like benefit payments, which would help to break some of this cycle of poverty. So that's kind of an example of the way in which some of these co-benefits can relate to each other, and we haven't really focused on climate change in giving this particular example. What I'd like to do is also to mention a former Ashden winner. So a project called Shine, which was set up by Islington Council. It's one of my favourite of the previous Ashden winners. So they run this concept called boilers on prescription. So the housing team of the local authority have teamed up with local GPs, and when particularly elderly members of the community go to their GP with a health-related illness, particularly around things like pneumonia or respiratory-related illness, which could be related to the quality of their house, rather than just being given medication and sent back home to the house that made them ill in the first place, they, with their permission, their details are passed on to the housing team of the local authority, who go into those properties, who conduct audits, who help to install energy efficiency measures, which helps to actually deal with the root cause of their illness rather than just dealing with those symptoms, thereby reducing ongoing NHS costs. And a nice example which is mentioned in the paper is from New Zealand, where they actually did a really detailed study of following up with the impacts of an energy efficiency programme, and found that in the winter months the children who were living in those houses had 21% more days at school as a result of living in a house that was warmer and therefore being less ill. So just to move on now to some of the kind of wider health impacts of climate change, a lot of the co-benefits relate to the health area. And a lot of literature has emerged over only the last couple of years in the relationship between poor air quality, particularly levels of particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide, and health-related ailments. I'm not going to list them all here, but we've got issues around dementia, around strokes, around heart disease, around lung disease, around diabetes. I gave this presentation to my wife a couple of days ago just to test it, and she was like, "What have you got in the top right-hand corner here?" So I should just make it clear that these are kidneys and a bladder, just to avoid any confusion. Anyway, so this is a paper which was written by one of the co-authors, Sarah de Mateus, of this paper, and it basically concluded that pretty much every organ in the body is negatively affected by poor air quality. And it's something which is obviously an urgent issue at the moment. Particularly because it's also socially regressive. If you're living in poverty, you're disproportionately likely to have poor air quality where you live. So to that end, the other co-authors, Daniela Fecht from the School of Public Health here, worked with UK Health Forum, the business school here in Public Health England, to put together a toolkit that local authorities can use to try and put a financial cost on poor air quality. So this is free to everyone to use, and I've tweeted about it on my profile, and it will be sent out via email later as well, or you can also just Google it. So what this allows you to do is to select your area. There's already data on air pollution levels already pre-populated. enter information about the demographics of your area, and you can test what-if scenarios. So what if we reduce levels of pollution by a certain amount? What will that impact be upon health costs, in primary costs, in secondary healthcare, and also in things like medication costs as well? So just to kind of bring things together with some recommendations that are set out in the paper. So I think that the city scale offers a really exciting opportunity to take advantage of some of these co-benefits, particularly because I know many of you have set ambitious carbon reduction targets. Also because you just understand how these things relate to each other on a local basis. And many of you have your own houses in your local areas. You have direct control, potentially over the energy efficiency of those properties. You have control over relevant budgets, not, I appreciate, in all instances. And so I think one of these areas, if you have a transport policy which reduces cost of the NHS, as a local authority, you may not see those financial benefits yourself. So I think there's an argument for closer collaboration with local health trusts. And I think city scale and local authority scale is really important because of the opportunities to share good practice, and that's what I think the toolkit brings together really well. These good examples of what's already taking place, and hopefully following today an opportunity to share them on an ongoing basis. At the national scale, we have some recommendations. So one of our suggestions is for something like a co-benefits fund to be set up to encourage better cross-departmental collaboration to take advantage of these multiple benefits that action on climate change can achieve. A suggestion would be around setting up something like an Office for Public Health and the Environment to sit between BEIS, between the Department of Health and Social Care, DEFRA and Department of Transport, for example. I think a key thing that needs to take place is around better quantification of co-benefits in the decision-making process. And the forthcoming comprehensive spending review offers an opportunity for departments to better conceptualise and at least take into account the impacts that their department has upon climate change if it's not so obvious from their specific remit. So linking to that last point, I'll finish off by posing a question to you. So if you'd like to get your phones out again and go back to Slido. So the question for you is what tools, like the tool I mentioned from air pollution and NHS costs, what tools would you like to see developed that would help you to better incorporate the co-benefits of climate action into your decision-making processes? Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you at the networking session later.
Thanks very much, Neil. So I'll just switch back over to Slido. Now, this is the only one where we're giving you freedom to say whatever you like. You don't have to choose a multiple choice. So I'm not sure whether or how this will display the results, but basically we will take away what you say here and consider them. We've got some coming up here. So spot checks on vehicle pollution, a cost-benefit analysis tool. Well, funny you should mention that. We're going to be hearing about one of those a bit later. Easy ways to see savings for councillors. Linking climate action to social value politics. A co-benefit cost calculator. One thing you'll find when you've downloaded the toolkit, there's the final chapter, chapter 6, is a list of useful resources, and it lists all the tools that we came across when doing the research for this, some of which provide some of these things. We would love your feedback. We'd love to know about more, where there are things we've missed. We'd love to know about more, and Neil will be taking away these findings and considering them in terms of what should be supported next. Okay, so I'll just turn that back off again. But keep sending in your answers, and we'll take them all away for consideration. I should also have mentioned that we will be, subject to speaker permission, be sending around all the presentations to everybody who registered through Eventbrite after today. Okay. So next up, we're going to hear from my colleagues Simon Brammer and Cara Jenkinson from Ashden, who are going to introduce the toolkit. Simon is head of cities at Ashden, where he leads a programme to influence city region leaders to use their devolved powers to co-solve health, transport and housing problems through climate solutions. And Cara runs the alumni network of the Ashden Award winners, which showcases their work. We'll be hearing from some of them later. And she also co-authored the toolkit. So over to Simon.
Thanks so much. So it's really nice to be here today. And for those of you that don't know Ashden, we're a sustainable energy charity. We've been around for about 19 years. And our aim is to create positive change. Our mission is of a prosperous, healthy world transformed by sustainable energy. We have a global discovery process which searches for some of the best sustainable energy organisations globally. And then through our ceremony and our media work, we shine a spotlight on those organisations to help others to learn from their best practice and to prevent them reinventing the wheel. But we go further. We go on to work with our winners to provide support to help them scale and grow, and also to ensure that their work becomes embedded in both policy and practice. And that's why you'll see many of our winners appearing in the toolkit that Cara will talk to you about later. Now, I'm really pleased that in the previous Slido poll that engaging citizens was right up there, otherwise we wouldn't have very much to talk about this afternoon. So why is climate change important? Well, sometimes it's pretty obvious, but if you look at the picture behind me, you might think this was Bangladesh, but it isn't. This is Lincolnshire in the UK this week. Police evacuated more than 600 homes because of the risk of severe flooding. This, after more than 2 months' worth of rain fell in just 2 days. So when we think about the consequences of climate change happening elsewhere, we only need to look on our own doorsteps. We've all seen the reports of the state of the planet. So the Intergovernmental Climate Change Report, the UN report on the really worrying loss of biodiversity, reports on rising sea levels, and the erratic and severe weather that we've just witnessed ourselves. But it isn't just about climate change. We're living in an increasingly fractured society, and the process of tackling climate change can help bring that society back together, to bring us together and to improve all of our lives and make sure that we are ready for whatever the climate throws at us next. So why the focus on towns and cities? Well, the majority of UK residents live in urban areas and cities are responsible for more than 80% of carbon emissions from our homes, our factories, our transport systems, for instance. But local authorities are well placed to drive and influence action on climate change through the services they deliver, through their regulatory and statutory functions, through their roles as community leaders, major employers, large-scale procurers and social landlords. And Ashden is working with UK cities to help them realise those sustainability ambitions through our Livable Cities programme and our Low Carbons Network. The toolkit that we're launching today puts our methodology and therefore people front and centre of that climate response. But the discussion about climate is often about giving things up. So we asked ourselves that question. Does stopping climate change really mean giving things up? When we go and talk to cities and citizens about their visions for the kind of cities they want to live in, it's pretty universal the kind of things that they start to say. They tell us they want to live in cities with clean air, with a sense of place, with green spaces for their kids to be able to play. They tell us that they want ease of access for transport. They don't want to be struggling to get around cities on polluted and congested streets. They want space for cycling and walking. They want their transport integration to be good. They want access to new training and jobs, fairly paid jobs, and this is particularly important for those post-industrial communities that are seeing job losses on a daily basis. They want good quality food and they want to be able to buy their food from around the corner. They don't want to be going to out-of-town giant supermarkets. They tell us they want to be involved in renewable energy. There's a high level of understanding of what that can do. So whether that's through community energy organisations or whether that's about generating energy on your own home. But overall, people want to live in cities that are on a human scale, that are livable, that allow us to prosper and enjoy ourselves, to engage with our communities and neighbours, and to be places where people are no longer lonely. By responding to these desires, we engage with people's values and demonstrate that climate action can deliver positive results for everyone. And this changes the discourse from giving things up to getting things back and improving lives. And by addressing inequality and poverty, we can also create a just transition. We've developed an approach that brings people, policy and climate together. By focusing on positive change to tackle climate change, you can take people with you. And not wanting to be outdone by the Grantham Institute, we've also made our own film, which hopefully will explain some of those concepts.
To avoid catastrophic climate change, we must radically cut carbon emissions, 80% of which are created by cities. But big, rapid change needs public support. Well-designed policies connecting the climate emergency with people's everyday needs create that support. People want better jobs, a thriving local economy, more green spaces, clean air, warm homes, and healthier travel. With the right policies, we can solve climate and social issues at the same time. Improving air quality, for example, reduces NHS costs, freeing up money to make public transport better or homes more energy efficient. Greater citizen support for climate action gives councils and governments the power to move faster, to cut carbon more radically, as good results unlock new funding from lots of different budgets. The Ashden Co-Benefits Toolkit helps city regions and local authorities take urgent action to stop the climate emergency and improve all our lives, now and in the future.
So the UK Parliament, Scottish and Welsh governments and more than 100 local authorities have now declared climate emergencies. But as we heard earlier from Jonathan, what does that mean? What is the action that's going to result as a consequence of that? We believe you need to take people with you, and that way you can create much bolder action. On this slide you can see behind me, this is an image of a workshop that we delivered in the West Midlands. We believe you can multi-solve climate and social challenges at the same time with well-designed policies. We use this approach to help understand the real-life challenges of citizens living in those cities. We task leaders, policymakers, budget holders, an array of local organisations, from trade unions to community organisations, to multi-solve climate and social issues simultaneously. By improving lives, you reduce the need for expenditure on health, welfare or social services, for example, and that money can be used to improve lives and continue to tackle climate change, creating a virtuous circle. But not just that. At Ashden, we have an array of award winners. We have more than 90 tried and tested award winners in the UK and hundreds of others overseas. And we can offer cities some of the jigsaw puzzle pieces they need to become net zero carbon. In this way, cities can be confident that these approaches work, improving lives and stopping the climate emergency. I'm on my last slide, Cara, I promise. Putting people front and centre to gain the public support that you need is really important. And the toolkit does this by engaging citizens' values, by listening and responding to what they need, developing smarter policies that multi-solve issues and climate change, addressing inequality and poverty, releasing funding for different solutions to be delivered at speed and scale, ensuring those solutions are tried and tested and fit for purpose. By doing this, you reframe climate change and the challenge that we face from giving things up to getting things back and improving lives. And that's what we call a just transition.
Okay, so someone else gets to time me now. Show me the red card. Right, so I'm going to give a brief whistle-stop tour of the toolkit. The primary audience for the toolkit is local authority officers looking to make the case, whether it's to elected members, whether it's to mayors, or whether it's to senior managers. And we also see the toolkit being used to bring different council departments and services together, possibly with external agencies as well, to develop a holistic approach to taking climate change action. And we think the toolkit should be useful for elected members as well, whether they're in cabinet, or whether they're on scrutiny committees. The toolkit is an online resource, and you can cut and paste relevant bits according to what you need. So a key part of the toolkit is a series of films that we've developed, and you'll recognise this picture from Simon's slides. And this is, as he said, something we developed in the West Midlands. And it's really about looking at climate change action and what's needed from the point of view of individuals. And what we've done is to create 3 composite characters. They're based on the lives of real people in Birmingham. They've been scripted by the fantastic playwright Sarah Woods. They're really to help provoke conversations around taking action on climate change. So there's Nigel, who you see on the left, who's a skip, who owns a skip hire firm. There's Susie, who lives in temporary accommodation, single mother. And there's Amira, who is 18-year-old college student and who suffers from asthma. And we thought it'd be useful just to play a short bit of one of the videos. This is just a clip from one of them. I can get that to play. Press enter again.
I'm Amira. I'm 18 in 10 days' time. I'm from Bordsley Green in Birmingham. I'm at college. I have to go straight home on most days to be with my nonni. She lives with us. She's got dementia, so she can't remember stuff. 2 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. I couldn't breathe. I got rushed to hospital and the doctor said that I had asthma. Nonni says it's the air. She says the air's heavy. She says there are things in the air weighing her down. I think she's right. I don't tell her, but I think she's right.
So that's just a quick excerpt from the film. The longer film shows quite a lot more about Amira's life. And what we learn from that is that she lives on a busy road in Bordsley Green, and air quality is obviously an issue there. Probably her asthma is a result of that. She goes to college, but we learn in the longer film she doesn't like it much, doesn't really want to do what the business and law course that she's doing. She's interested in nature and in animals. And also she's a carer for her grandmother that has dementia. So how would we use the toolkit to help solve some of the issues that Amira is facing? So the toolkit is structured around 4 key chapters. And those focus on each of 4 co-benefit areas. So health and well-being, economic opportunity and job creation, resilience and equity and social cohesion. And each chapter has a similar format. So it starts off with some key facts. It then provides links to useful facts that relate to your local area, so local authority statistics. Set out the business case for action with lots of detailed facts, evidence, all referenced. Each chapter contains around 30 or 40 references. Links to statutory duties, looking at what role decision makers can play, and then opportunities for action. So we're going to go through each chapter very quickly, just to look at each section. So health starts off with some key facts. So there are key facts in relation to air quality and health, fuel poverty and health, diet and health, green space and health, quite a few of those things that Neil mentioned earlier on in his presentation. So for Amira, it would be the statistic that 40,000 people die from air pollution related diseases every year in the UK, or the fact that if the NHS and other authorities were to encourage active travel, the NHS could save around 17 billion over 20 years. And then, as I mentioned, links to local data, so that'll be a little bit hard to read, but in relation to air quality, we'd be looking at national walking and cycling statistics, including at local authority level, links to DEFRA's air quality modelling, which provides lots of rich local data. And then we move on to the business case for action. And so this is looking at making a business case for different types of action to deliver on that co-benefit area. Again, lots of facts and figures to support that business case, and lots of examples. As others have said, key point of this toolkit is to share experience, to share best practice. So examples from Ashden winners and examples from pioneering local authorities. So one of the examples included is from Ashden Winner, the Active Wellbeing Society, and they encourage cycling in communities that don't usually get on their bike, and particular success with Muslim women actually, so definitely relevant to Amira's situation. Moving on to the next co-benefit area, economic opportunity and job creation. And for some reason, one of the pictures hasn't shown up here, which is repowering. But it's fortunate we've got Aga from Repowering, who's going to be talking about his particular case study. So, as others have mentioned, clear economic benefits from low carbon action in terms of jobs. So for Amira, not sure what she wants to do. Well, lots of opportunities in the low carbon sector. And we've got nice links to a Bayes report that shows what young people in different UK regions think of the green economy and opportunities offered by that. And the other photo here is Qbot, and you'll be hearing from them too later. That's another Ashden winner. And there they are, repowering again. So next area is equity and social cohesion. As Neil mentioned, in terms of equity, we know that people that live in deprived areas like Amira are more likely to suffer the impacts of poor air quality. And I need to stand near the microphone. So this chapter really looks at the where action on climate change can benefit equity and social cohesion, whether it's fuel poverty, whether it's providing better access to public transport, car sharing schemes, making sure new developments don't build in car dependency, a range of different areas there. And then final chapter around resilience. And resilience in the broadest sense, resilience to climate change, resilience to future increases in energy price rises, and resilience to the transition to electric vehicles. And we got, again, case studies throughout. This is actually one from outside of the UK. It's Medellin in Colombia. They have a really fantastic urban greening project there, which delivers co-benefits in the areas of increasing biodiversity, improving health, providing employment for all of the gardeners that maintain it, and also, importantly, addressing the urban heat island effect. And then, as others have mentioned, there is a detailed resource section, several pages of useful resources, tools, including the one that Neil mentioned, evidence bases, which should be very helpful for you. As others have mentioned, we really do want to get feedback on this. We regard it as a living resource. We're going to keep it up to date. We're looking to get more case studies. So if you know good examples of work either you're doing or others are doing, do let us know. We want more case studies, and we want potentially future Ashden winners as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cara. And if you go to the website where you can download the toolkit, at the bottom of that page you'll find there's a feedback form, so you can use that to send us comments, additional information we should include in the next update, and suggestions of case studies. We really would love to hear from you on that. So our next speaker is Dr. Ruth Stevenson from the Centre for Alternative Technology, which won an Ashden Award back in 2011, and which is particularly famous for its pioneering work setting out how we can achieve a zero carbon Britain.
I can use it. So I'm Ruth. I work at the Graduate School of the Environment at the Centre for Alternative Technology. But I'm going to be drawing today on the multi-solving approach that's been developed over the last 10 years or so by the Zero Carbon Britain team at CAT. And the multi-solving approach really takes 3 levels, really. We have to attack it through multi-sector, across silos. We have to approach it at a multi-level, across all levels of the system. And we have to approach it at a multi-scale, so between scales of organisation. And I'll run through what that means. So back in 2014, Zero Carbon Britain Rethinking the Future was published. And that showed that the UK's greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced to net zero in 20 years. And in that publication, you'll find detailed calculations on how we can get there without relying on future technology. We have all the technology we need. We don't need to develop new carbon capture, massive, interesting, exciting technologies. We have them already. And without major impacts on quality of life, which is what's been addressed this morning. So they identified that actually we can do this, but we have to work across sectors. We have to have every single sector involved, not just the energy sector, not just buildings and industry, but also transport, waste, water, and food and diet. And back in 2014, not many people were talking about food and diet. But in that report, you can find calculations on all those different sectors. And if you just look in the bottom right-hand corner here, the background data for that is all set out. So we're looking at a power down of 60% reduction in energy use. It is possible. It seems like a lot. I was talking to some housing associations down in South Wales yesterday, and they've made a 40% reduction across their housing stock in energy use over the last few years. It is possible. And also in the report you can see how we can deliver that through renewable energy, primarily, but also with lots of interesting balancing and smart storage. In terms of co-benefits, they're set out in the report as well, and I won't dwell on those because we're going to be hearing about those later. But what's important is that we're looking at reduced pollution potentially through not using fossil fuel generation. We're also looking at health improvements through energy efficiency. So the health sector needs to be involved. The health community needs to be talking about energy. And then one of the other sections is around food, diet and land use. And again, there's detailed calculations of what needs to change. So we were talking in 2014 about reducing our meat consumption. We need more land for growing vegetables and protein, but not meat-based. We need to leave a lot of space for carbon capture, so we need to grow more trees. We need to restore our uplands. And we do need some space for fuels, for biogas and biomass and biofuels. But by doing so, we end up with co-benefits. So we've got jobs, we've got increase in soil health and reduced flooding, that sort of thing. But we've also got potential dietary changes, which mean we've got reduced obesity and reduced healthcare costs. So again, the health sector being really key to this and being an important part of the conversation. So many organisations have used the zero carbon approach, and just to pick on one, Green Wedmore. So you can see across the top here, they were focusing on all sectors. So they were focusing on power, on feeding themselves, on travel, on what they were growing. So we need that multi-sector approach. And Sonia Bedford from Green Wedmore said they adopted the Zero Carbon Britain approach and they found that the data in it was useful in giving them gravitas and weight to their approach. But we don't just need multi-sector, we need multi-level change. And I think this is really important when it comes to multi-solving rather than co-benefits. And back in 2017, Zero Carbon Britain Making It Happen set out actually that we have all the science and technology we need. What's the problem is all this lot here. That's what we need to be looking at. So you can have a look at the report. I'm not going to go through all of that. Let me just focus on transport, for instance. So we're looking to reduce our carbon emissions in transport. So we might think, okay, what's the important thing? We might implement car charging points for electric cars to encourage electric car use. Okay, but I like to think of this in terms of an iceberg. I know this analogy is used a lot, but I find it quite useful. So what you're dealing with by charging points is really the tip of the iceberg. You're not dealing with the car use, the behaviour which encourages car use. We're not dealing with congestion. We're not dealing with safety. And we're not dealing with the system which supports that. the infrastructure that supports that. And we're really not dealing with the mental models that support that system. And I know this might, and that's around consumerism, it's lack of connection with community, it's lack of connection with nature. And I know this might seem a little bit esoteric and maybe outside your realm, but actually I don't think it is. If we swap it around, and I know a lot of people in local authorities are talking about mobility now, not transport. So let's think about mobility. Let's start at the bottom of the iceberg. Let's start with increased well-being. That is one of our requirements in the local authority. And as soon as you start thinking about well-being, then you need to think about maybe implementing green infrastructure and cycle lanes. And then you get all these multi-benefits. So you improve air pollution, you improve health, you improve road safety, and you improve species diversity. You're delivering on all those requirements. And therefore, importantly, you're leveraging in funds from all of those requirements. And then we might start to talk about reducing carbon. And we might approach that through electric buses or hydrogen buses. So you can see the conversation, and I think this tallies very well with what the Ashden group are doing, is the conversation has to start at the beginning with increased well-being. And then we get reduced costs across the system. So some areas that have used this, Frome, Town Council has employed a resilience officer, and she said that ZCB reminded us that not only do we need practical projects, but we need system change. And Cumbria Action for Sustainability have used ZCB approaches, and they've used fuel poverty to open up funding for climate change action. So it's about thinking cleverly about where you can get that money from. It's limited money. And last week I was just involved with our CAT graduates, or our CAT students, and just to note here that as students we teach MSc level, and we teach food students, we teach energy students, we teach people who are studying building, all around sustainability. We teach them all together. And so there's a really cross-fertilisation of ideas. And last week we were working with the Machynlleth Climate Emergency Group. And we were talking to them, people in Machynlleth, about how we might address, they've declared a climate emergency, what on earth are they going to do? What's their action plan? And in talking to the local people and to the group themselves, a number of issues came up. One of them was road safety. And that was a key leverage point, a key issue for people living in the area. And so by focusing on road transport, road safety for cycling, you increase the use of cycles, you reduce the amount of car use, you improve health and well-being, improve active transport, but also you're tying in with something that the locals feel very proud about, which is their environment. And I think that's missing sometimes in the conversation. We ask people what the problem is, but we don't say, what's great? What's great about your area? What can we tie in that's great? And so this tied in very well with how the locals felt what was important about Machynlleth. It's a rural area, it has a lot of tourism, so the environment was really important. So I think those conversations have to go both ways. And so the third way is, in terms of multi-solving, is across multiple scales. And in raising ambition, there's set out a lot of examples of zero carbon action plans across the world at different levels, so at national level, at subnational level, and at sub-regional level. So you can have a look at those. Lots and lots of examples from across the world. And if we're thinking about that level of action in terms of local authorities, I think you need to work upwards, downwards, sideways and inwards. We need to work upwards, we need to be lobbying government, we need to work sideways, we need to share good practice across councils, and we need to be working with our community, we need to be finding out what's wrong, we need to be finding out what the community are already doing. We've been hearing people are engaged now. Let's engage with them, see what they're doing, pick up on what they're doing, pick up on what's great about their area. But also remember your staff. They're the people that are going to be implementing this. They're the people that need to be on board. All of your staff. So just to finish off, some of the lessons we've learned for multi-solving that might increase our ambitions, thinking across disciplinary silos, really so that experts in one field have the knowledge to optimise gains in the other field. It's a difficult ask, but it needs to happen. Breaking through budgetary silos, again, a difficult one. Investment coming from one sector in terms of transport might accrue in another sector in terms of public health. So you will need the lawyers on board. That's another sector that's going to be really important in this change. Avoid short-term thinking. I know we have to think about quarterly and annual reports, but health and climate benefits are long-term. And focus funding on prevention rather than dealing with the effects, because then we'll have proper system change. Big asks, but things I think that some of you are already doing and our communities are really engaged with. So join the change at Centre for Alternative Technology. We are a charity, but we deliver short courses. We have a visitor centre. We deliver postgraduate courses as well. So come and talk to me afterwards.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Can I just check for the people at the back? Are you hearing everything all right? And it's quite, yes, okay, lots of thumbs up. If you're ever lucky enough to go and stay at the Centre for Alternative Technology, you'll find, or at least you would when I visited last about 5 years ago, instead of there being a Gideon's Bible in your bedside drawer, there's a copy of Zero Carbon Britain. So if you're a bit short of reading material, it'll keep you up all night. So Cat were one of the Ashden winners a few years ago, and as we've heard, the Ashden Awards is there to really showcase the brightest and best in terms of sustainable energy. And we've invited 3 of our most recent winners and finalists to come and present very briefly on how their work generates co-benefits. So first up is Mareike Schmidt, Head of Operations at Qbot, which won an Ashden Award last year for their robot, which insulates underneath floorboards. And her previous experience includes several years as an energy service manager at Bristol City Council.
So, what does robotics have to do with climate change, you might wonder? And we've already heard quite a lot if you work for a company called Qbot. What we do is underfloor insulation. And you see one of our friends on this slide, and this is my only slide for today. So what we do is underfloor insulation, and I think it's worth just quickly explaining how it works, because it's probably a little bit difficult to sort of imagine. So what you see on the slide is, I think this is in one of our demonstration areas, but what this represents is the void of a house, so underneath a house. I'm not sure whether anybody has ever been underneath a house. Can I just ask the question? Yes, a couple of people. Oh, very good. So you've probably all insulated your homes from underneath. Yes, yes, fantastic. It's not a nice space to be in, whoever has been underneath the house, okay? Also, in terms of health and safety, it's not the safest place to be, because obviously you've got the services usually underneath the property. So underfloor insulation is an area which hasn't been looked at very much in the UK. And we have 8 million homes in the UK that have suspended timber floors, so need to be insulated. A quarter of the heat goes through the floors, and it's a little bit forgotten about, and that's what Qbot is about. We want to provide a solution that works much more efficiently, and it's also safer, because obviously we don't want to send people underneath properties if we can avoid it. So how does it work? What we do is, to start with, we make an access hatch. Sometimes there is one already in the house, usually where the stopcock is. And we take up some of the floorboards, we make a small access hatch, and then we insert the robot into the void. And we can drive the robot around. We use 3D laser technology, and we survey the space. And that's really important, because what comes out of it is a 3D image of the whole of the space. And that really helps with doing good quality installation, because we know where the services are, how the space looks like, what is underneath the house. And whoever has been underneath a house, it's very surprising sometimes what you find, okay? Everything from rubble through to shells, very surprising sometimes. So once we've surveyed the property, the next step is then we know what's underneath the house. We then insulate the suspended timber floor with insulation foam. So the robot that you see here is usually attached to a hose and a van with the insulation materials. Again, we insert the robot, drive it around with a joystick, which unfortunately you can't see here on the slide, and we insulate in layers of sort of insulation underneath the suspended timber floor. And then to sort of finish it all off, we survey the space again. And the reason for that is we want to do really good quality installations. We want to be able to sort of measure the insulation depth, and we also want to show to our clients that we've insulated everywhere, because obviously the clients can't look underneath the floor and check whether we've done it properly. Really important in terms of quality control. So that's how it works. I want to quickly talk about the building stock. No surprise, in the UK it has the worst building stock in Europe, unfortunately. There's a lot to do. And I just want to give you some figures for London. And they're 2 or 3 years old, and Cara has been helping me with it has been helping me with it. 3.35 million homes account for 36% of CO2 emissions. And every household here in this city spends on average £1,175 on gas and electricity. That's a staggering total of 3.9 billion. Okay, and I just leave it there because I think really important figure to keep in mind. And obviously the figures vary, but we have 2.5 million of households living in fuel poverty. That's 11% of all households in the UK. So we need to do something about it. QBot is one of the solutions that we can sort of apply. The advantage of QBot's solution is, of course, it's non-disruptive, and I haven't sort of mentioned that yet. If you only have to make an access hatch, 1 or 2, don't have to take out the furniture, and you can basically leave the tenants. We work very much with social housing providers and local authorities on their housing stock. You can leave the tenants in the property. They just have to go upstairs for health and safety reasons. That saves money. And it's also very effective. We insulate within 1 to 2 days, so much quicker than if you use traditional methods of underfloor insulation. And we are the most cost-effective solution available after loft and cavity insulation. And I'm very pleased to say as well, this wasn't the case last year yet, but we are now also eligible for one of the really important funding sources for local authority energy company obligation. There's a new innovation strand. It's been introduced. We're one of the first measures that are eligible. We had to apply for that. I think there's only 5 or 6 companies. We are one of them. So what that means is if you have any housing stock with D-rated properties, you can't do anything else to it now apart from innovative measures. So maybe keep that in mind. I want to talk about the benefits a little bit, and I want to talk about the benefits of the QBot solution. £140 to £240 in terms of energy savings. Average cost is approximately £2,000. It depends on the size of the property. With Eco, you get approximately a third of the price. Okay, but it also has wider benefits, and I want to talk about job creation, because people often say robots kill jobs. Not always, not in our case. We're 35 people at the moment, okay, scaling up quite a lot at the moment. And I want to talk about one particular job that you might not be aware of at all, and that's the job of a technician. And it's really skills that we need in the future, I think. So our technicians usually are carpenters, tradesmen, and what happens is we actually upskill them. We have a training program, a 5-day training program that they go through, and obviously they have to learn how to drive a robot and how to manipulate the gamepad to be able to insulate a home. So we've really sort of upskilled people quite a bit. Some of them move forward and sort of moved towards the engineering sort of field quite a lot, to do with service and maintenance. So it has a really positive impact in terms of job creation. Obviously, combating fuel poverty, I think I don't have to say why. We're sort of making energy savings. And so, sorry, I'm getting the stop sign. So what must I say? So obviously saving energy for people, that helps with fuel poverty. And I want to mention that we obviously make homes more resilient as well for the future. Our solution has a positive impact in terms of mold growth in the property because you insulate the home from underneath and therefore it dries the house out. So really positive step for the house overall. Sorry, Cara.
Thanks very much, Marika. I can attest to the fact that trying to insulate under your floorboards yourself is not a fun job. We had a go when we moved into our house 10 years ago. I wish we'd had a robot, but we did find a stash of homebrew plum wine from the early 70s. Tragically, it proved to be undrinkable. So, next up we're going to hear from Agamemnon Otero, who's co-chief executive of Repowering, which won an Ashden Award in 2016 for their pioneering work installing community-owned solar in the more deprived parts of London and setting up a successful internship programme for local young people. He's got to somehow extricate himself from the front row. There we go. Athletic leap over.
I expected a bit more applause for that. That limberness is I think, quite good. So I don't have that piece around my neck, so I'll stay here, and it's probably a good idea. Because I think most times... Ooh. Push my... Press the button. Ta-da. Okay, well, I was going to say that actually it's a good idea I stay in one place because I want you guys to go into a different place. I want to take you pretty much around London, and to do that I'm going to need to stay still, and I'm not going to wow you with lots of slides. If you want to see slides, you can go online and watch films because there are hundreds of them. As the chief exec for Repowering, what we've been doing, particularly with over the last 10 years, and I went to the Centre for Alternative Technology and was had the great honor of being able to bang on the door of Jonathan Porritt and say, you know, I see all these problems, what are we going to do? And I think they were all like, there's so many things you can do, but are you going to do them? Are you going to find the fulcrum point, and are you going to come up with a cogent response to that to help deliver something in not 2050 and not 2025, but now? So I'm going to ask you, in my 7 minutes remaining, to really just see the estate in Bannister House in Hackney, with grey corridors walking from the train station at Homerton underneath the overpass of the train, walking through what is huge new buildings rising up with glass and steel, with maybe even a grass facade, walking past that into the Homerton estate, which has huge amounts of, which is brick, steel, concrete, grey, and social housing. 736 properties, which are predominantly in fuel poverty, and it's in an area where there is no green spaces. And that juxtaposes with these huge new expensive properties that are being in, and realized that the Homerton Road was called Homicide because it had the highest levels of stabbings in the country. And that is where your journey will start. And that is where it ended for many of the young people that we've been working with. We've lost 3 young people in the last 12 months, and who were part of the youth training programs. But we've also had a huge amount of resilience born from them, and I want to give you the opportunity to look at them with us, which is Repowering focuses on providing local authorities and corporates the opportunity to support communities to take control of their own destiny. And through that, we say, by using and building an energy cooperative. We run a paid accredited London living wage 40-week long training program for young people, a schools program which uses art, music, and dance so they can look and think about sustainability, to use the movements that we know about, the food that they want to eat, not the food that we tell them, I'm a vegan, you should eat this. They can choose those that they can then think about sustainability in a new way. So that when they go home and they say, Mom, Dad, Grandma, because a lot of these families are broken, do you want to be a part of a project where we save energy and we change the way we turn off and on the lights in our school? They can come to a community meeting in the evening, whether that's in Bannister House or whether it's up here near Grenfell, where we've just completed an 83 kilowatt project for £87,000 2 months ago, with 3 different communities in an area which we all know, we don't have to talk about in this borough, was a very difficult time, that they had something they could do. You come together and you support, through finance, IT, technical, legal, media, and marketing solutions, how they can own and manage their own energy system, which will have a revenue stream to support them to do what they want. And I can put my hands up and say, lots of great ideas have been thought up in my green glass tower, but the real solutions are on the ground in estates in your boroughs, and that has been the real issues when knocking on doors has been, I need to pay for food, I need to pay for transport, I need to pay for housing, I have to pay for healthcare, and I have to get a job, education and employment. The last thing I'm thinking about is energy, and if I ever make any savings, what to do with it. And then finally, if I ever have any savings, I want to help the community. And so by providing them with a revenue stream to plant food around their homes, to take extra revenue and reduce their energy bills and have savings and have education, they are invigorated and engaged to begin a virtuous circle and stepping out of those negative circles. So you are 4.2 miles away from the Delgado Center, which has a solar co-op around all different estates around the Grenfell Tower, where you had 100 odd different people in the local area invest in that and go through paid accredited training programs. And we've been doing that in 4 local authorities across London, and we're working with 14 local authorities and TfL, Network Rail, GTR, Arriva, on a London-wide community gardening project, which does the same thing, but it puts solar across the overground. So we're looking at 7 megawatts on specific stations and depots to then demonstrate to people that they can grow their food, generate the energy, because while individual estates are separated out in different places, I'm on that, that's good. When they're separated out in their different estates, these pockets of solutions have been successful, and I implore you to go and look at repowering.org.uk. But we need to be talking about the fact that 27% of the country's emissions are coming from transport, and the trains have a major implication on air quality, even though they're better than cars. They're not better than riding and cycling. And so to have that discussion and debate on the station platforms has been truly invigorating. There are 34 of those stations, and I implore you to all get involved with that and look at that. So it's been a really exciting piece, but the co-benefits have been a heart piece. We've seen real clarity, and 2 reports which have come out of Imperial internally from the Environment Program, seeing well-being, sense of self-esteem, and that feeling of empowerment has been coming through. So much so that there's costing about £5,000 per community group that is directly being supported from costs that have been saved to the NHS. So if you want any of those further information or other benefits that have specifically been delivered by the Repowering program, I'm very happy to answer those questions. But for now, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Agamemnon. And you can read more about repowering and our other winners in the toolkit. And I have to say, of all the photos, one of my jobs was to choose the photos to go in the toolkit. This has to be my favourite photograph. And for our last finalist, we've got Councillor Clyde Lokes, who is Deputy Leader of Waltham Forest and who leads the Enjoy Waltham Forest programme, which is a mini Holland scheme involving major upgrades to cycling and walking infrastructure and improvements to public spaces. The Enjoy Waltham Forest programme is shortlisted for this year's Ashden Award for UK Clean Air in Towns and Cities.
Thank you. It's rare I get a clap before I've actually started, so it's interesting that just as I start talking about a cycling scheme, Jonathan's walked out to go and fix his puncture. Okay, good afternoon everyone. I've got a slide deck here that I'm going to kind of rush through because I've been told it's too long. So this is me. Waltham Forest is a North East London, outer London borough. Some of you may have heard of it. It's got Leytonstone, Walthamstow, Leyton and Chingford. Mini Holland was a programme invented by potentially the next Prime Minister, but we'll move on very quickly. Because at that point I disagree with him on everything else. Okay, so what have we done? So it was a massive injection of cash to start to transform the way that outer Londoners move around. Traditionally, outer Londoners love their cars, and it's been a constant struggle to get them out of their cars. This was a big lump sum injection of cash, 27 million. By the time we'll have finished the programme later on this year, we'll probably have spent near 50 million to put in cycling infrastructure, modal filters, road closures in local neighbourhoods, introduce a huge programme of complementary measures to improve cycling and walking. And as you can see, there's some examples here of what things used to look like on Leabridge Road, which is the busiest road in Waltham Forest for every mode of transportation, putting in quality segregated cycle track there. Is an example about what we call modal filters, road closures to our opponents. But of course, if you're a pedestrian or cyclist, you can still get through. And actually, if you live in these roads, you can still get to them by car. But what you can't do is use them as a rat's run. You can't use it to bypass the traffic management systems that exist on main roads to control the sheer amount of traffic that exists there. So this is a road that had around about 4,000 vehicles a day using it. It is a tiny residential street, but it was used to bypass a number of main traffic junctions. So we introduced this very nice, lovely pocket park, some people like to call them modal filter. And what this picture alludes to is, if you're going to do this sort of stuff, if you want to get residents on board, it has to have a quality attached to it. If we're to make some of these big leaps in faith, in changing behaviours, then there needs to be a quality around the works that we do. And it is no good just putting a lump of concrete in the middle of the road and saying you have done your thing. Just go back, sorry. This is another example, a one-way street, 2,500 vehicles a day used to come up here. We've created a more significant modal filter here that the community have taken on board. It is now I guess you'd call it a town square in anywhere else outside of London, that the community used for kind of markets, Christmas Carol related activities, protests against the council, that sort of thing. But that's democracy, and that's called engagement. Right. Okay. Again, quality. What we've got here is where we're taking road space away from car parking spaces. We had some examples of huge junctions that basically just encouraged you to drive exceptionally fast in residential streets. And what you can do by narrowing those junctions, not only make those roads safer by slowing the traffic down, actually you create pocket parks for where people can come, sustainable planting, rainwater gardens, lots of wildflowers, people love it, and it just looks nice. And of course, since we started this work, it's always sunny in Waltham Forest. Every single picture demonstrates that it's sunny, but polite sunny, not rude climate change sunny. And it's good for the economy too. So we've got a number of very traditional shopping parades that were dying on their feet, but actually take out the through traffic, take out the thousands of vehicles a day that were using it, that were parking on the pavements, preventing people from accessing the businesses located there, and all of a sudden you've got a thriving local place where people want to spend time want to talk to their neighbours, want to go shopping, want to have a coffee, want to buy a newspaper, want to buy a birthday present, and the economy in these areas is really starting to thrive. And that's a plus for the economy, and it points out some of those co-benefits in this toolkit very, very strongly in these particular areas. Just a summary of some of the stuff that we've done. Excuse the figures, I was just messing around with them, and they clearly haven't worked. But in short, to our critics, we've closed 52 roads over the past 3 years, taking out thousands upon thousands of through traffic. Okay, but I want to touch on the health benefits. So we got King's College in, no offence to Imperial. I don't know the academia kind of protocols there, but we got King's College in, and they've made some assessments of the infrastructure work that we've done already and what that would mean to air quality. And actually, from an air quality perspective, it means babies born since 2013 are likely to live an extra 6 weeks longer as a consequence of the work that we have done. Highways work, not public health work, highways interventions. Yeah, that's quite powerful. I've been a councillor for 21 years. I don't know any public health work that can demonstrate that kind of improvement, but this is highways work. We know our NOx levels have improved massively, and even our PM levels are improving too. And there's a next slide. Sorry, I'm rushing. Here's a map. So yellow, orange, red, really, really bad, really bad. Green, blues, better. Still a lot to do, but actually we've reduced the number of households exposed to illegal levels of NOx from 60,000 in 2007 to just under 6,000 in 2017. I don't know another London borough that has dramatically improved that currently. And then on walking, physical activity, also within 1 year of our Mini Holland interventions, because everyone was talking about it, because we did so much boring consultation and engagement with so many people and everyone hated it, they couldn't help but start walking and cycling more. And so within 1 year, and Dr. Rachel Aldred, I'm sure some of you all know, she was very, very surprised that within 1 year we'd already started to see massive improvements in the amount of active travel being demonstrated. We've not had the follow-up years yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oakes. I think polite sunshine should become part of the weather forecast from now on. I love that. So it's a marathon session this afternoon. I realise we've got 2 more external speakers. The next one is Mark Atherton, Director of Environment for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and he's going to talk about how they've incorporated carbon into their cost-benefit toolkit.
Do we need to put a mic on, or can you hear me at the back? Good. Okay. So I work for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. It brings together 10 local authorities that make up Greater Manchester under one elected mayor. And in a very quick presentation today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about work that's in progress. It's not quite complete, and I've got some asks at the end, so you might want to pay attention. In terms of what we've tried to do, it came from a piece of a realisation, actually. I asked one of my team to go away and work out whether we could invest local authority money in housing retrofit. Not necessarily for fuel poor, but just housing retrofit generally. And they went through the cost benefits analysis tool, which we've developed with Treasury over the last 5 years, since 2014, and basically said it doesn't come across as being cost beneficial. I said, well, that's strange. Why is that then? And we dug into it, and we found that the cost benefit assessment tool that GMCA was using, and we'd agreed with Treasury as part of supplementary guidance to the Green Book, because it was developed with public sector reform in mind, it really didn't look at the co-benefits that energy and low-carbon projects could deliver. So a lot of the benefits that you've just heard about for the last hour and a half weren't included in the assessment, and therefore we weren't making that cost-benefit assessment rationale, and therefore we weren't finding the right reasons for the local authorities to invest in low-carbon energy projects. So, presentation I've got is only 5 slides, but I wanted to do a bit of a quick test. I'm going to make a big assumption that half the room are policy wonks, and the other half of the room are data geeks. So if you're a policy wonk, hands up. Not bad, okay. Other half of the room, data geeks. It's not bad, it's 50-50. So the good news is, for the policy wonks, you're going to love the presentation because it's nice, simple words and there's no numbers. And for the data geeks, you're probably not going to like the presentation, but you're going to love the tool because it's full of Excel spreadsheets with numbers and cells, and it's the sort of thing that makes my eyes glaze over. But our research team, they think it's orgasmic. So I've probably used my 8 minutes up already, haven't I? I'll move on quickly. I think I've covered most of this. Basically, it's a supplementary tool already linked with the Green Book, and so it is endorsed by HMT. And basically what we've done is take the existing tool. About 18 months ago, we were funded by Bayes to look at the existing tool for the reasons I've explained and update it. So we did 3 different things. We updated the existing cost-benefit analysis tool, and we added in a whole new section on low carbon and energy. So there's a raft of information in there now which allows you to look at the benefits of energy projects in the same way and on the same level platform as investing in any other infrastructure. It allows you to be able to quantify, well actually you can put into the tool what you think the expected outputs are going to be or what the expected impacts are going to be, and it will churn out return on investment, what the cost-benefit analysis ratio is likely to be, what the NPV is likely to be. These are all the sorts of things that project managers require when they're asking for funding to get a project off the ground in the first place. So that's the updated cost-benefit model. We then looked at an existing unit cost database. Now what this is, it's just a big Excel spreadsheet. Yeah? But what it has is several hundred lines of examples of how you can turn low carbon projects into the wider economic or social benefits that they accrue. And it started off, as I said, as public sector reform. So they looked at health and smoking. There are loads of lines in there about that. But health and low carbon or health and environment, no, didn't really. So what we've done is added in an awful lot of information from existing academic papers and government tools, information that's out there, but now we've put it into one place. And finally, we created a multi-benefit roadmap, which in effect is the guidance tool. It's for policy managers. It helps you to navigate the toolkit itself, but also it points you in the direction of the other guidance that's out there, because there's a plethora of information from government departments, from NGOs and others that give you examples, as Ashden's has done in the current toolkit, about how projects have made a difference and what sort of benefits they've accrued. And what this benefit roadmap does is basically point where they are online. The detail of each of those is up here. I don't think I've forgotten too much other than to say, in the first part, in the cost-benefit analysis tool, what we did was take Bayes' existing interdepartmental appraisal guidance, and we've embedded that fully and deeply within the existing cost-benefit analysis tool. So there is now a full carbon calculator within the tool. For the unit cost database, it's particularly useful if you don't have local evidence. If you don't know how much something is likely to cost, it gives you examples of how much it's cost elsewhere. It gives not just unit costs of materials, but also things like processes, how much time they can take, installation values, and it allows you to make some assessments so that you can do a preliminary understanding of what the costs and benefits of a project might be before you go into the full in-depth appraisal analysis. And finally, the multi-benefit roadmap. You can see in the dark grey, there are lots of benefits that have already been talked about today, actually, about investing in energy projects, but there are lots of other benefits that aren't currently even thought about, usually, when people are putting project bids together or project appraisals together. And what the toolkit does is point to evidence that shows where those other wider co-benefits are likely to be. So that's the multi-benefit roadmap. This is what it looks like on the front end. It's an online resource. We are currently in final user testing phase. So it hasn't yet been launched online. The existing CBA is online already. For the policymakers, it's dead simple because it just links to the Treasury Green Book, it links to the cost benefit analysis, unit cost database, and it looks great. When you start clicking into them, it goes into these really wild Excel spreadsheets, and that's where your data geeks come in. So that's my final slide. I think my asks, I said I would give you two. If you're a policymaker, think about how you could utilise this or something like this to be able to make the case for the projects that you currently struggle to create a cost-benefit assessment for, or a cost-benefit case for. If you're a data geek, there is a particular ask, which is, as I said, this is in the final stages of finalisation. If anybody really wants to dig into it and see how it works and give us some feedback before we finalise it, that would be tremendous. Please can you do that through the organisers? They can give you my email address. I've actually got it on my laptop, so you can have a look at it if you want before we go, but on the screen it's tiny words. And then finally, when it goes live, it's currently being appraised by Bayes project appraisal staff. All of the assessments that I've put in that are included within the tool have all been agreed by the chief economists of each government department. So there is a really good rationale for you saying that this is, I wouldn't say government approved, that's the wrong word, but it has been tested by government, and all of the data that's in it is road tested through the different government departments. So that's it, that's the tool, and if you would like to come back and find out a little bit more about it, then I'm more than happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And just to reiterate what he said, if you're keen to input into the testing of it at all, if you just email Ashden, mark it for my attention, Emma Jones, and we'll make sure that gets through to Mark. Just before I introduce our last external speaker, we haven't had any Slido activity for a while, so if you want to go back onto Slido for a question... Right, get this back up here. So our last speaker is going to talk about climate emergencies and the impact that's had in her region. So we wanted to do a straw poll of the room and find out how many people here are represented by councils that have declared a climate emergency, or indeed know whether their council has declared a climate emergency. So let me just pull that up again. So has your council declared a climate emergency? We open the... Oh yeah, it's active now. So yes, in progress, no plans, or don't know. I have just done a review of all the home counties and none of them seem to have declared climate emergencies. So I'm not sure what that says about where people are from today. But we've got a 50% yes so far. Yeah, so a majority that seem to come from councils who've declared a climate emergency. For those that don't know, maybe your homework could be to go away and find out and ask them if they haven't, why not. But what does it actually mean? So our last external speaker is one of the founding members of the Ashden City Region Combined Authority Sustainability Network, Jane Wildblood, who is the Climate Change and Environmental Sustainability Professional Lead for Bath and North East Somerset Council, where she's worked since 2005. And prior to joining the public sector, she was campaign director for Greenpeace. So over to Jane.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to tell you the story about what's been happening in Bath and North East Somerset, starting with these folk here. So I know this has been happening everywhere else, but I'm just going to tell you what it's felt like and how we got to our climate emergency resolution, and then what that's meant in terms of action afterwards. So this was outside the Guildhall in Bath back in February. This was a protest outside a council meeting that was taking place. And we just don't see protests like this in Bath normally. So this was kind of different. I mean, I recognise one or two of the faces, but the quantity of people out on the street and then inside, I mean, I have to tell you that the Democratic Services folk were very worried about people coming in and gluing themselves to heritage furniture. It didn't happen, but the public gallery was packed. And on that particular meeting, we had 4 community speakers, the like of which we've never seen before, talking about climate emergency. And there were families there were children in the public gallery. This doesn't normally happen in my part of the country. And what they were demanding was cross-party action and moral leadership. So I was impressed. I was in the council chamber, and I have to admit, when some of the speakers were speaking, it brought a tear to my eye, I have to say that. I've been working on this stuff for a very long time, and you wait for these moments every now and again. And But I wasn't expecting much to happen straight away, right? Because it wasn't the actual vote. I knew that was coming. I knew it was on the agenda for the following month's council meeting. But something very strange happened the following day, which is that I got an email from my director saying that he'd just had a chat with the chief executive, and that clearly climate change was now, the second most important issue to our residents after Brexit. And would I mind dropping everything and making it a priority? Have been for the last 15 years, but no. But jollity aside, that was a quite surprising reaction from senior officers, and I want to just talk to you a little bit about why I think that's happening, because lots of people have been asking me that, because it's different. I think it is different. I think what's going on here is different from what I've experienced before. And so why is that? Well, I think it is the scale and nature of the public protest is definitely an absolutely key factor. It's not the usual suspects on the doorstep. The number of protests that we've had, the school strikes in particular, I think that it's that element that has really woken some people up. But I think it's more than that. I think there was definitely a pin drop moment in that council meeting in February when we had speakers from the community coming in. Particularly there was a local mum, there was a local vicar, there was a couple of writers. These are not the people we normally see, and they weren't talking about dog shit and buses. So this was, and I think what it was feeding into was the fact that a lot of those senior officers really do worry about this issue, and like a lot of us, or a lot of other people in the community, have got it in the back of their minds, but didn't feel they could really do anything about it in their day job. And I think it's that combination that has given people like my chief exec and the directors the opportunity to say, right, okay, if this is what the public wants, let's go for it. And that's very unusual. I've not seen that before. I feel as though it's those people have been given permission to take action. And I should say, I don't think it's come out of nowhere either, in that although we're a small unitary down there in the southwest, we have had a lot of action on green issues. We have a lot of green activism in our community over a long period of time. I've been running a community-wide environmental partnership now for over 10 years with cross-party support, and I think having had that in the background, although it hadn't done a lot, it had done some things at certain times when there were political opportunities to do so, but I think it was just that cross-party working over a long period of time was what got us to this meeting, which was a month later in the council chamber in Bath. This is the unanimous vote from a Tory-controlled council, but it was a joint motion with the Liberal Democrats and the Labour group to declare a climate emergency. And you can see them all straining to make sure we get that vote through. I didn't expect this to be a unanimous vote. There was one abstention only. Quite extraordinary. This is what the motion says. I think this is similar to many that maybe your authority has declared. So it's declare a climate emergency. The second line is really important. This is about providing leadership to enable carbon neutrality in Baines by 2030. And I'll come back to that. We've signed up to the UK 100 Clean Energy Pledge as part of this. And then I think the last point is one I want to come back to in a bit more detail, which is about citizen engagement, which we've heard about a few times already today. So now we do the typical local authority schematic. And this is really what we're doing to respond. Can you see that? Yes. So this sort of encapsulates the plan so far. So as with most of these motions that have gone through now that are based on the Extinction Rebellion petition, we have a commitment to come back to council in 6 months' time with a progress report with some kind of plan. But there's no detail on that. So I think what I want to explain to you is the sort of the changes that have happened and some of the key elements of this plan. So if you take the sort of the blue bits at the top, that's the stuff that the council is doing. What's happened since we've declared the climate emergency is we've had a change in administration. So we've had a big swing from Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats, who I think have absorbed the Green vote, to be honest, because it's such a huge majority that they now have. They have appointed a climate emergency cabinet post. We've not had one of those before. I think there are one or two others in other parts of the country, but not many. And I think that's clearly a significant move. We've set up a new directors steering group, so that's my steering group now that's leading on how are we going to tackle a climate emergency in Bath, North East Somerset. And really importantly, this will mean something to those of you that work in local authorities, is we've changed the decision-making template. Okay, so this is the template for all reports that anyone in local government has to write. If you want any money or you want to do anything, you have to fill in one of these templates. And usually it covers things like, what are the financial implications, what are the risks of doing your project, what are the equalities implications, and so on. We now have a line that says, how does your report or how does this budget that you want contribute to achieving carbon neutrality in Bath and North East Somerset? And so that's really interesting, because it does mean that at every point when this question is going to be asked, most people don't know how they're going to answer it yet, so we can come back to that. But it's really important to have that in there. The other thing that's happened is that we've reviewed our scrutiny panels. So we now have just 3 scrutiny panels. These are like parliamentary select committees, but at local government level. And we now have one that is called the Climate Emergency and Environment Scrutiny Panel, which means that they'll cover everything. And then all the other scrutiny panels have also got to talk about climate. They have to cover it as well. So what this is about leadership, and it's about public engagement. I don't want to miss my last slide, because I've been told I've only got a minute left, but we're setting up a new partnership that is going to be bigger and better, and that is going to be about all the plans that the council is responsible for on transport, on waste, on housing, having to demonstrate how they're going to tackle a climate emergency, rather than all the years when I've been trying to push environmental stuff into their plans. So I was asked to think about challenges and are we at a tipping point? I don't know. The change feels pretty seismic in terms of what I've been experiencing in Bath, North East Somerset, but I don't want to give too optimistic a view here. It's really important not to be complacent, because I think the real challenge here is how the hell are we going to deliver enough action fast enough that is visible enough for those folk who've been out on the streets, and the youth strikers are going to be outside the Guildhall again tomorrow, for them to see that we are actually doing something. Because setting up a partnership, doing a piece of research which I've got currently underway, isn't going to look like action to them, but these are essential first steps that we've got to take in order to develop those action plans. And the other 2 things that I'm really concerned about is there's a lot of interest at the moment. I've got lots of people coming to me, officers coming out of the woodwork saying, I can make this policy stronger, can't I? And I can brush off that radical idea we had a few years ago and bring it back again, can't I? I'm going, yeah, do. But will we maintain the momentum is a big question I've got, and which will face all of us in local government. And then finally, how do we convert the public concern that has been so visible on our streets and in other places into support for the decision-making process? Because the demand is to set up from the protesters almost a separate decision-making, like a different democratic process. But in local government, we already have democratic processes, and the problem we've found is that people don't get engaged in them. So my challenge to Extinction Rebellion protesters and the school strikers is, please can you turn up at the parish council meetings, and can you turn up at the community forums, and can you take part in the planning consultations, because we need the green voice to come through if you want radical action, and it hasn't been. So when we consulted on a very radical air quality action plan earlier this year, I went out to all of my green contacts and said, please tell us what you think and support this more radical action on cars. They didn't do it. So the majority of the responses that came back said, no, please don't touch cars. So we've not been able to act. The politicians haven't been able to act. So I think that's the challenge for us all, is how do we bring people in a way that has an effect on that decision making. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much, Jane. And it would seem if there was one really simple thing that all those councils that have declared climate emergencies should be pushed to do, it would be to include that in their decision-making template. At our meeting this morning, people were saying to Jane, could you share your decision-making template? We could copy that. And she said it's simply a question. It's just adding that question in, so that before policymakers sign off on a third runway at Heathrow or whatever it is, they've thought about how this will impact on their climate emergency. So finally, thank you all very much for bearing with us. It's been a long afternoon, but finally I'm just going to hand back to Simon Brammer just to wrap up and talk about what happens next.
Actually, and to Jane's point, I think it's really important that we involve people in supporting and sustaining the kind of momentum that we've developed in terms of tackling climate change. And actually the co-benefits approach, I think, is one of the ways to do that. If you can demonstrate to people that taking climate action improves their lives, then you get people with you. And that is perhaps one of the solutions. We are going to wrap up very shortly, but I just wanted to remind us of one of the reasons why we are undertaking this work. And it isn't just about climate, because if you're living on the poverty line, it's about what's important in terms of your life. It's about being able to feed your kids, it's about keeping your home warm, it's about having enough money to be able to feed them. We have a whole series of films, as Cara pointed out, which are part of our toolkit. They're meant to bring to life the real life situations of people living in our cities. And I'd just like to show you this one. I'd like you to meet Susie. Susie, who fell into debt after being unable to pay her ridiculously high fuel bills and subsequently lost her home. This is not unfamiliar for the 10% of people living in fuel poverty in the UK. And this is what her reality looks like.
I never asked to be a single parent. I never thought when I was pregnant, when I was with Mark, I'd be a single parent. It was the first time I'd ever been on my own, so I went for benefits. Universal credit. 6 weeks I waited for my first payment. There wasn't enough for the bills, I got behind with the rent. When the benefits came, I was behind. I wasn't eating so that there was enough for the kids to eat. I had to go to a food bank. I had a loan. When we got evicted, I saw someone at the YMCA. She said, "It's not just me." She said, 1 in 5 households in Birmingham are pushed to poverty by the cost of heating and lighting. We're living at the Travel Lodge at Franklin Services at the minute. M5 southbound. We've been there since March.
I think Susie's example is a very powerful one. You don't have to be concerned about climate change, but actually if you can see that those measures are improving your lives, then actually it takes everybody with us on that journey. And it does deliver, most importantly, a just transition. So, what's next? I realise I'm standing between you and drinks, and frankly I don't want to stand between myself and drinks, so I'll try and keep this as quick as I can. Our toolkit's now on the website, so it's available to download, so please go do that. As Emma and Cara have both mentioned, we want your feedback. This is meant to be a living document that we can update with your case studies, with your examples of co-benefits. So please do send that information to us, and do fill in the kind of newsletter piece at the bottom of our website so we've got your contact details. That would be really helpful. So at Ashden, we're going to continue our work with cities, particularly with the metro mayor regions. We currently have a number of funding applications in to allow us to do 2 much deeper dives. We're planning on working in Teesside and continuing our work hopefully in the West Midlands to look at how working through our multi-solving process really creates change and what those outcomes might be. And to pick up on the points that Mark was making, how do you analyse and understand the kind of cost benefits and return on investment for that? So that's where Ashden will be going next. Just a reminder, if you're interested to hear more about co-benefits, as part of London Climate Action Week, we are hosting a conference in partnership with Bloomberg, looking at the co-benefits of sustainable energy and the interplay between health. So we'll be looking not just at co-benefits in the UK, but at the development and delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals internationally as well. If you'd like to come, just have a look at our events page on our website, or I think there's a flyer also in your packs. Then lastly, I just want to say a few thank yous. But whilst I'm doing that, on the screen are all the various components you need in order to tweet, and we'd really like you to do that. not because we want to inflate our own egos, but because we want people to know about the toolkit and we want to be able to disperse it as far as we possibly can. I was told this morning I've been making several mistakes on tweeting lately. I'd forgotten the suffix in our particular handle. So I'd been tweeting to a single person in India apparently, was wondering why no one was replying to my tweets. So that'll be why. So just in terms of a few thank yous, I'd really like to put some thanks out there for all the people who've been talking today, for our speakers. They've given you some fantastic insight and information, and hopefully they brought to light for you the kind of co-benefits piece that we're really talking about. Huge thanks to both Emma Jones and Cara Jenkinson, who are the lead authors on this report and have toiled endlessly to make sure all of your examples are included in the toolkit. I'd like to thank Mike Pepler. Mike helps us bring all those award winners to the fore, and they are part of what we can do at Ashden, not only raising issues but providing the solutions. I'd like to thank the broader Ashden team, and particularly Emma from Comms, who did a sterling job yesterday to get all of our toolkit online on time, so thank you for that. A huge thanks to Sarah Woods. I know Cara's mentioned already. She's an amazing activist and playwright. Sarah's helped us develop the methodology as well as developing the films, and actually we're going to be continuing to work with Sarah, so thank you, Sarah. It's been hugely, hugely appreciated. Thanks to the Grantham Institute, not only just for hosting us today actually, but for working in partnership with us to try and create the kind of change that we want to see. And thanks to our city network leads, you pushed us to develop this toolkit, so thank you for that. And if you'd like to talk to any of them, they are in the room this evening. But most importantly, thank you to you. Thank you for coming, but thank you for rising to the challenge of stopping this climate emergency. And thank you for involving people and helping to improve their lives. So, without further ado, I think we're ready for drinks. Emma, anything you'd like to say? Go on, the last Slido, why not?
We will release you for drinks. There's one last Slido question, which is about how easy it is to share best practice. We can use your answers in this as evidence to help us seek funding, should you say that it's not that easy to share best practice. But I'm not trying to lead you in any way, shape or form. So if you could just answer that. Okay, difficult, 75%. We'll take that. Thank you very much. So thank you all very much. We can give all our speakers one last round of applause, and then it's back down to the reception for drinks.